March 1974, 29 years had passed since World War II ended. Peace and prosperity had spread everywhere. But in the dense and terrifying jungles of Lubang Island in the Philippines, a soldier was still fighting the war. His uniform was torn in many places, but his rifle and sword still gleamed. This man was none other than an intelligence officer of the Japanese Imperial Army, still fighting alone, 29 years after World War II had ended. And fighting against American forces, no less. Think about it. When the entire world was celebrating peace, new cities were being built, and people had long forgotten the old wars, this man was single-handedly fighting a war that had been over for years. His name was Hiroo Onoda, and for him, time had stopped in 1944. He believed the enemy was still lurking in wait, and the moment he stepped out of the jungle, he would be captured. But the question arises, how can any human being be this committed? How can a person survive alone for 29 years without any supplies or help, completely cut off from the world? For the world, World War II ended in 1945. But in reality, it ended in 1974 because technically, a war continues until the last soldier surrenders. Was this simply a soldier's duty, or a stubbornness that made him the very last prisoner of World War II? Hiroo Onoda was born in 1922 in a small village in Japan. But this was not the Japan we know today for robots and technology. This was a Japan that dreamed of conquering the entire world. In that era, when a child took his first steps, he was not taught to walk, he was taught to die for his emperor. Onoda's childhood, too, passed not in play, but in the shadow of strict discipline, an environment where the word surrender did not exist in the dictionary. Children were taught from a young age that death is better than surrendering in war. Onoda was a product of this militarized environment, raised to believe that loyalty meant treating every command of your commander as the command of God. But what was that one order which forced Onoda to fight World War II alone for 29 years? 1944 World War II was at its peak. Japan was up against America and its allies, and the situation had become very grim. Japan was losing the war badly. But the Japanese High Command played one last card. They decided to create guerrilla soldiers who could silently wreak havoc in enemy territory. Hiroo Onoda was among those few selected soldiers who were sent to the Nakano Military School for guerrilla training. This was no ordinary military school. Here, Onoda was given thorough training in intelligence, espionage, and launching surprise attacks on the enemy. He was taught how to survive alone in the jungle, how to set enemy supply lines on fire, and how to exhaust an entire army through guerrilla warfare. But most important was the special order given to him by his commander. After training was complete, the commander looked Onoda in the eyes and said, "You must not surrender under any circumstances. Remember, you are not permitted to commit suicide either. Whether it takes 3 years or 5 years, we will meet again. But until then, you must not let the enemy sleep in peace." These words lit a fire inside Onoda that would not cool for the next 29 years. For this mission, Onoda was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines, a small island completely covered in dense jungle. Strategically, it was very important for Japan because American and Allied supply lines passed through it. Hiroo Onoda, now an intelligence officer, had a strict mission: disrupt and destroy, to launch surprise attacks on enemy supply lines, monitor them, and turn every corner of the jungle into hell for the enemy. He was to remain on this mission until the Japanese Imperial Army came back to retrieve him, whether it took 5 years or 10 years. Onoda had only been on Lubang Island for a year when, in August 1945, the world witnessed nuclear weapons being used for the first time. America dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, shocking the entire world. After this, Japan officially surrendered, and this was the turning point that ended World War II. The war was over, but there was no one to deliver this news to Hiroo Onoda on Lubang Island. He was still there, lying in ambush with his 3 companions, Akatsu, Shimada, and Kozuka. The Allied forces, aware of the guerrillas on the island, dropped millions of leaflets saying, "Japan has surrendered. The war is over. Come down from the mountains." But when Onoda read these leaflets, he suspected it was a trick to lure him and his companions into a trap. He had been taught that the enemy is very cunning. It will spread false news to mislead you. Only one thought was fixed in Onoda's mind. Until my commander returns, my war continues. And so began the trial of time that shattered the limits of human endurance. For years, Onoda and his companions roamed the island like ghosts. They had no roof over their heads and no rations to eat. Only the thick trees and wet soil of the jungle were their home. To survive, they ate raw bananas, coconuts, and occasionally rice stolen from local villagers' fields. When hunger became unbearable, they would emerge from the jungle, hunt a cow, dry its meat in the sun, and make it last for months. But this was not just survival. Onoda, considering local police and villagers to be enemies, attacked them multiple times. The toll of this lone war was heavy. His companions were slowly losing heart. But since Onoda was their senior, they were compelled to follow him. One by one, his companions left him. 1949 Akatsu surrendered. 1954 Shimada was killed in a police encounter. 1972, his last companion Kozuka was killed. After Kozuka's death, Hiroo Onoda was completely alone on the island. Lubang Island was sparsely populated to begin with, but the locals knew that Japanese guerrillas were hiding in the jungles. Onoda considered them allies of the enemy and attacked them under cover of night. Over 29 years, Onoda and his companions killed more than 30 local people and wounded over 100. The island's police tried many times to capture them, but Onoda's guerrilla training was so thorough that he would vanish every time. The Philippine government also tried several times to convince him the war was over. They dropped newspapers from the sky, threw letters and photographs from his family, and even broadcast his brother's voice over loudspeakers. But Onoda believed all of this was an enemy conspiracy. He had become quite famous by now, yet no one could see him. Some thought he was dead. Others said his ghost haunted the island. Remarkably, where military squads and search missions had failed, a 24-year-old Japanese boy named Norio Suzuki accomplished the task without firing a single shot. Norio Suzuki was not a soldier. He was simply an adventure enthusiast with only 3 goals in life: see a panda, see a yeti, and find Hiroo Onoda. He ventured into the jungles of Lubang to find him, and found him in just 4 days. On the 20th of February, 1974, Norio Suzuki and Hiroo Onoda came face to face. Onoda first tried to shoot, but Suzuki screamed his name in Japanese and said, "Onoda-san, the Emperor and the people of Japan are worried about you." Suzuki told him that Japan had now become a great power. But Onoda had one stubborn condition: "I will only believe it when my commanding officer comes here and gives me the order himself." Suzuki understood this war would not end with a weapon, but with a single order. The problem now was, where was the commander who had given Onoda his guerrilla orders 29 years ago? Nobody knew. After several days of searching, the Japanese government located the officer who was now selling books for a living. Major Taniguchi, the very officer who had given Onoda his orders. After careful planning, a special mission was arranged in which Major Taniguchi was sent to Lubang Island to break the chain he himself had forged 29 years ago. When Onoda saw his old commander, he stood at attention and saluted. At that moment, his commander took out a piece of paper and read aloud the words written on it. "Officer Onoda, Japan has lost. Your mission now ends. Hand over your sword and rifle to the enemy." The Onoda, who had entered Lubang at the age of 22, was now 52 years old. He had sacrificed his youth, his friends, and the best years of his life to a loyalty that, in the eyes of the world, was no different from madness. When Onoda returned to Japan, he had become a national hero. He expressed sorrow multiple times over the deaths of the 30 people he had killed, thinking them to be enemies. But the Japan he had left 29 years ago was gone forever. Now it was ruled by technology and Western culture. He could not adjust to this new environment, and the very next year he left Japan and moved to Brazil. In 1996, Onoda returned to Lubang Island, the same island where he had spent his youth. He donated $10,000 to the local people and set up a scholarship fund to ease the pain of those whose loved ones he had unknowingly killed. He also gave several interviews and openly discussed his journey in his autobiography. His story gained worldwide fame when, on the 16th of January, 2014, at the age of 91, Hiroo Onoda passed away due to heart failure in Tokyo. Japan certainly suffered a devastating defeat in World War II. But Hiroo Onoda was perhaps the one soldier who won his own war, yet lost the war against time.